single dad CEO mistakenly sends his daughter to the wrong school, only to meet a young teacher who will change their lives forever. You enrolled her where? That's not the school on her file. I submitted the forms you left on the desk, sir. It was signed. That's not her school. That's a mistake. Fix it. Daniel Ross's voice echoed through his glass-walled office like a thunderclap. At 42, he was a man used to precision, an empire built on data, risk analysis, and cutting-edge medical tech. Nothing in his world happened by accident. Except now, something had. His new assistant stood pale, flustered, fumbling with a tablet. "Sir, I thought—" "I don't pay you to think," Daniel snapped. "I pay you to follow instructions." He paced to the window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. His reflection glared back at him in the glass. Tailored suit, sharp jawline, sleepless eyes. Keva, his daughter. The only thing he hadn't figured out how to fix. Since Emily's sudden death from a stroke 3 years ago, Keva had changed. Once vivacious and imaginative, she had retreated into a shell. She rarely spoke. She no longer smiled. Daniel had tried everything: grief counselors, therapists, endless distractions. He compensated with the best of everything: clothes, tutors, a spot in New York's most elite private academy, Hawthorne, and now this. A clerical error, a misfiled form, and his daughter had spent her first day of second grade at Southfield Elementary, a public school. A school known for its emotional development programs, not its academic rigor. Not the place he had meticulously chosen. He picked up the phone to call the superintendent directly, then stopped. A text blinked on his phone screen. "Keva, I liked my teacher today." It was the first message she had sent him in weeks. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then he sighed, loosening his tie. "Reschedule my 3:00, he said quietly. "I'm going to the school." Southfield Elementary looked nothing like Hawthorne. The entrance was modest, the floors were scuffed linoleum, and the lobby smelled faintly of crayons and cafeteria pizza. A secretary with kind eyes welcomed him and led him through a narrow hallway filled with student artwork. Sunlight streamed through the old windows. There was no marble, no chrome, but there was color, there was warmth. As they approached Keva's classroom, Daniel motioned for silence. The secretary nodded and stepped aside. He peered through the small glass panel on the door. Inside, 20 or so children sat in a semicircle. On a low stool in the center was a young woman with wavy auburn hair tied loosely back, wearing a cardigan and jeans. She wasn't giving a lecture. She was listening. One child spoke through tears about missing her dog. Another boy admitted he was scared of loud noises. The teacher didn't interrupt or rush them. She nodded, validating each voice with gentle presence. "You don't have to be okay today," she said softly. "You just have to feel safe." Daniel's breath caught. Keva sat near the back. Not slumped. Not vacant. She was upright, attentive. There was something in her eyes. Soft. Open. Alive. He stepped back. That night at dinner, he placed Keva's favorite pasta in front of her. She glanced up, cautious. "How was school?" he asked, gentler than usual. She hesitated. MS Clara read us a story. She let us draw what the characters felt, not just what happened. Daniel nodded slowly. "Would you like to stay there, at Southfield?" Keva didn't answer right away. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Daniel stood alone in his study long after Keva had gone to bed. On his desk lay 2 folders, one labeled Hawthorne Academy, the other Southfield Elementary. Hawthorne had prestige, connections, results. Southfield had a teacher who looked his daughter in the eye and told her it was okay not to be okay. He closed his eyes. Maybe for once, the best thing wasn't the one he had planned. Maybe the real answer had arrived by mistake. Clara Jennings had never planned on becoming a teacher. 10 years ago, she was a mental health specialist in the Army, trained to sit with soldiers shattered by war. She had seen what trauma did to the strongest minds, She had learned that silence often screamed the loudest. When she left the service, she returned home to a small apartment, a toddler son, and the hope of a quieter life. But that life was ripped away on a rainy Tuesday morning when a delivery truck ran a red light. After the accident, Clara quit everything. Hospitals, therapy clinics, places with ticking clocks and clipboards that never truly listened. Instead, she found herself drawn to Southfield Elementary, a public school where administrators had the courage to experiment and children were seen as whole humans, not just students. Now she taught room 203. Not English, not math, but something harder, the invisible curriculum of feelings. Her classroom had no desks in rows. The lights were soft. There were beanbags, calming jars, colored pencils, a reading loft shaped like a treehouse. There were no timed tests or behavior charts. There was a wall labeled Feelings Today, where students placed magnets with their names under emotions like brave, sad, tired, hopeful. They wrote letters to their feelings in quiet journals. They used music to paint with color, not with technique. Every Friday, they gathered in a circle and shared something that hurt or healed. Clara knew they called her class the soft room behind her back. She didn't care. She was teaching kids what she wished someone had taught her when she lost her son: how to hurt without breaking, how to speak without words, how to stay. Keva Ross didn't speak for the first 2 days. She didn't draw, didn't smile, barely moved. Clara didn't push. When the other children shared how they missed a pet or worried about the dark, Clara simply glanced at Keva with a warm nod. "You're welcome here," her silence said. On day 3, Clara noticed Keva sitting closer during morning circle. On day 4, she saw the girl gently rest her hand on the corner of a paintbrush. On day 5, Keva placed her name magnet under quiet instead of invisible. It was enough. Daniel Ross stood behind the classroom's viewing window for the 3rd day in a row. He came during lunch breaks now, watching in stunned quiet. His first impression had been critical. No structure, no worksheets, no rigor, just kids sprawled on rugs, listening to cello music while drawing spirals on paper. He had thought, this is chaos dressed as compassion. But then came the change. Keva had started sleeping through the night again. No more 2 a.m. pacing, no more glassy stares at breakfast. She had begun humming softly, unconsciously, while brushing her teeth. She had even asked for crayons to take home. Something was waking up in her, and Daniel didn't understand it. But he couldn't ignore it. On Friday afternoon, Clara dimmed the lights and turned on a soft melody. "It's connection time," she said. Students were invited to sit with someone they hadn't talked to that week and share one thing that made them feel calm. Keva hesitated, then walked over to a boy named Caleb, nonverbal, on the autism spectrum, who often sat alone at lunch. She knelt beside him, reached into her backpack and took out 2 cookies wrapped in foil. She held one out to him. "No one should eat alone," she whispered. Caleb didn't speak, but he took the cookie. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned his shoulder against hers. Clara froze in quiet awe, and Daniel, watching through the door, unseen, felt his knees weaken. He turned away, stepping into the empty hallway, blinking back tears. His daughter, who had stopped connecting with the world, had just chosen empathy over fear. That night, when he tucked her in, Keva whispered, "I gave Caleb a cookie." Daniel smiled, brushing hair from her forehead. That was kind. She looked at him, eyes wide and clear. He felt like me. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Maybe this wasn't just the wrong school. Maybe it was the only place that had ever been right. It was Thursday morning when Clara rolled in the small wooden box she called the mailbox to heaven. She set it gently on a low shelf by the classroom's reading nook and placed a tiny sign above it, "Letters to Someone We Miss." Some of the children had seen it before. Others stared at it curiously, unsure. Clara knelt beside them. Sometimes we carry things in our hearts that feel too heavy. This week, I want you to try writing a letter. Not for grades, not for anyone to correct. Just a letter to someone you love, who isn't here anymore. It can be someone who passed away, or someone who feels far. You don't have to sign your name unless you want to. Keva sat near the corner, watching quietly. She didn't move, she didn't speak. But that afternoon, as the others painted and chatted in soft voices, Clara noticed Keva pull out a piece of pale pink stationery. She took a pencil, sat alone by the window, and began to write. She held the pencil like it might break, pausing between lines, erasing more than she kept. It took her almost the whole hour. When she finished, she folded the paper carefully, then walked to Clara. "Can you send this?" she asked, holding out the letter. Clara looked down at the trembling paper in Keva's hands. "To where, sweet one?" Keva pointed to the ceiling. "To heaven." Clara took it gently, pressing her hand over Keva's. "I'll do my best." Keva nodded, turned, and walked away. After school, when the children had gone, Clara unfolded the letter behind her desk. Her hands trembled as she read, "Dear Mommy, I played with paint today and didn't cry. The blue didn't feel cold anymore. I sat next to Caleb and gave him a cookie. He didn't talk, but I felt warm. Miss Clara said feelings are okay, even the sad ones. I still miss you. But today I wasn't scared. Love." Keva Clara's chest tightened. She held the letter to her heart, eyes wet, then gently placed it into the wooden box. She didn't speak, didn't try to frame it with psychology. She just sat there, breathing, letting the moment be. Later that evening, Daniel picked Keva up from school. She climbed into the back seat, quietly, as usual, buckling herself in without a word. Daniel drove in silence, the hum of the engine and city outside their only soundtrack. At a red light, he noticed something sticking out of Keva's backpack, a folded piece of pink paper. She had forgotten to zip the pocket. He hesitated. Then slowly, he reached back and took the letter. "Keva, what's this?" She looked up, eyes wide, but didn't answer. Daniel unfolded it and read. The first few lines were enough to shatter something inside him. The blue didn't feel cold anymore. I wasn't scared. I still miss you. By the time he reached the last word, Daniel had pulled over to the curb. His hands were shaking. He dropped his head onto the steering wheel and let the tears come. For 3 years he had buried everything. He had buried Emily with dignity, buried his grief under boardrooms and performance reviews, buried his daughter's pain under tutors and therapists and calendars. But this little letter in pencil and pink paper, was the most honest thing he had read in years. "Daddy?" Keva's voice was soft, unsure. He turned to her, eyes red, and took her hand from the back seat. "I miss her too," he whispered. "So much." Keva leaned forward, resting her head on the edge of his seat. She didn't speak, but her grip tightened around his fingers. It was the first time they had shared their pain out loud. The next morning, Daniel returned to Southfield earlier than usual. He waited until the last student had entered Clara's classroom before knocking softly on the open door. Clara looked up, surprised. "Mr. Ross?" Daniel stepped in, holding Keva's letter in his hand. He held it out, and for a moment Clara thought he was going to scold her. Instead, he said, his voice thick, "I run a company that develops life-saving treatments. We build things that are supposed to keep people alive." He paused, looking down at the folded note in his hand. "But you're the first person who's actually saved my daughter." Clara's eyes widened. "She's not just existing anymore," he continued. "She's feeling, connecting. She's remembering who she was." Clara swallowed hard, emotions swelling in her throat. "You've given her back to me," he said quietly, "and I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you." She stepped forward, voice barely a whisper. "You just did." Daniel returned to Southfield more often now, not out of obligation, but out of something quieter, more urgent. Curiosity had given way to reverence. Each time he stepped into room 2003, he felt as though he were watching something sacred unfold. Keva smiling faintly at a classmate, helping pick colors for the feelings tree, or even just sitting peacefully with a book in her lap, her forehead unknotted. One late afternoon, after the students had left and Keva was at music therapy, Clara was gathering handwritten gratitude leaves from the wall when Daniel stepped into the classroom. He hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something?" She turned, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Of course." "Why do you do this?" he asked. "This work? This place?" Clara paused, eyes drifting to the mailboxes, the soft lighting, the taped-up watercolor hearts along the windowsill. She exhaled, slow and steady. "I was a trauma counselor in the military," she began. "Years ago, I helped soldiers navigate PTSD, grief, survivor's guilt. I saw people at their most shattered, and sometimes at their most human." Daniel listened in stillness. "Then I came home. My son, Nathan, was 5. He was wild and sweet. Loved dandelions. We were walking to the park when it happened. Car accident, nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just sudden and wrong." She stopped, just for a moment, then continued. "After that, I couldn't go back to hospitals. I couldn't sit across from people trying to hold their lives together while mine was crumbling. So I chose to be here, with kids who haven't yet learned to bury their pain, who are still soft enough to heal." Daniel didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "I thought I was helping Keva by putting her in the best school money could buy, but I never asked her what she needed." Clara offered a small smile. "Most parents don't. They just want to protect them. It's a kind of love." Daniel nodded slowly. "A misguided one." He looked around the room again, the gentle colors, the space that had somehow taught his daughter how to feel again. "You didn't teach her to read," he murmured. "You taught her how to remember her mother." Clara blinked, her eyes glistening. "She talks about Emily again," he added. "She didn't for almost 2 years. And now? She tells me which songs Emily liked, what they used to bake together. She even drew a picture of the 3 of us, me, her, and Emily as an angel. The next morning, Keva slipped another letter into the mailbox to heaven. This one wasn't addressed to her mom, it was for her dad. Clara, after reading it, passed it to Daniel quietly at pickup. He opened it in the front seat of his car. "Dear Daddy, you smiled today. It was when I told you I like school. You didn't even notice, but I did. I think we're getting better. Love, Keva." He pressed the paper to his lips. His hands shook. That Friday, Daniel arrived early. The school was still winding down. The halls were hushed, sunlight crawling across tile floors. He walked toward room 203, ready to surprise Keva. But something made him stop outside the classroom door. Through the glass panel, he saw Clara kneeling beside Keva under the big classroom ficus tree. Keva's eyes were closed, her small hands resting gently against the bark of the tree. Clara whispered something. Daniel could not hear the words, but Keva nodded, breathing deeply. Then she giggled. It was a soft sound, like wind catching chimes. Clara laughed too, quietly. Then Keva reached forward, hugging the tree with tiny arms. Daniel's heart clenched. That laugh, that sound. He hadn't heard it in over a year. Keva turned toward Clara and whispered something. Clara crouched down, hugged her back, and wiped away a tear from the girl's cheek. Daniel stepped back, not wanting to interrupt. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, arms crossed tight. He wasn't sure what was happening between them. He just knew this. His daughter had started to return. Not just to him, but to herself. In the weeks that followed, something quiet and beautiful began to bloom. Daniel and Clara had stopped pretending to keep their conversations strictly about Keva. What had started as updates on progress and behavior turned into late afternoon chats in the garden courtyard after school, shared coffees in the staff kitchen, and once a slow walk through the nearby farmer's market when both just happened to run into each other. There was no grand confession, no sweeping declarations, just the slow thaw of 2 people who had long forgotten how it felt to be seen, One evening, Daniel sat across from Clara in the teacher's lounge after helping organize books for a fundraiser. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but the air between them felt like candlelight. "I never imagined this," Daniel admitted, sipping lukewarm coffee. "Raising Keva alone. 3 years ago I was still learning how to balance meetings with bedtime stories. Then one day I was both her father and her mother, and I never felt like I was enough for either." Clara's gaze softened. "You've done more than enough." He looked down. "But it never felt like it." She touched his hand gently. "Love doesn't always look like enough, but it feels like safety. And Keva feels safe with you." Clara was falling for him, she knew it, but a wall remained. She couldn't shake the feeling that her presence in this fragile world of theirs was something delicate, temporary. So she stepped carefully, held her heart tightly, loved quietly, until the day everything shattered. It happened on a Thursday morning, without warning. Margaret Whitmore, Daniel's mother-in-law, arrived at Southfield Elementary dressed in pearls and judgment. She swept through the front office with a legal pad and disdainful glances, announcing she was here to inspect the environment her granddaughter had been condemned to. No one stopped her. She found Keva in the courtyard, seated in a circle of beanbags under a tree. Clara was beside her, gently guiding the group in their morning gratitude ritual. Keva leaned her head against Clara's arm and whispered, "This is my safe place." Margaret's voice cut through the peace like glass shattering. "Safe? With this woman?" Everyone turned. Margaret stepped forward, eyes narrowed, voice rising. "You're not a therapist. You're not a counselor. You're a glorified babysitter, manipulating my granddaughter for attention. I will not stand by while she's raised by someone like you." Clara stood, keeping her tone measured. "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand this is a surprise visit, but this is not the place." "Oh, I'm sure it's all a surprise to you," Margaret snapped, playing the savior, getting close to a grieving child and her vulnerable father. "A woman like you, no husband, no real credentials, thinking you can replace my daughter?" Gasps rippled across the courtyard. Clara's hands were trembling now, but she held her ground. Then suddenly, shockingly, Keva stood. She moved in front of Clara, arms stretched out wide like a tiny shield. "Stop yelling at her," she shouted, voice shaking but strong. "She's the only one who listened to me. She's the only one who made me feel like I wasn't broken anymore." The courtyard went silent. Keva turned to Clara, eyes glossy but defiant. "If I could choose a mom," she said, every word trembling with truth, "I'd choose you." Clara dropped to her knees, stunned. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Margaret's mouth tightened, but she didn't speak. For the first time, she seemed unsure. And then Daniel was there. He stepped through the crowd, his presence steady, undeniable. He looked at his mother-in-law first, enough. Then, turning to Clara, he took her hand, not in secrecy, not in hesitation, in certainty. "We're not hiding anymore," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is our family now." The teachers didn't speak. The children watched in awe, and for the first time in years, Keva smiled. Not a faint curl, but a full, proud smile, because she had spoken her truth, and someone had listened. Someone had stayed. Daniel had never truly confronted Margaret before, not when she criticized his parenting, not when she second-guessed his every decision, since Emily's death. He had always absorbed her disapproval with the quiet guilt of a man trying his best and still feeling like it was never enough. But after Keva's declaration, after the whole school heard his daughter call Clara Mom, everything changed. Margaret stormed into his apartment 2 days later, waving a thick folder of legal documents and accusations. "She's manipulating the child," Margaret spat, throwing the folder on his dining table. "You're too grief-blinded to see it. This woman is unstable, emotionally dangerous, and enough!" Daniel's voice, calm but sharp, cut through her tirade. She blinked, stunned. "I've let you question every move I've made as a father. I've accepted your grief, your bitterness, even your insults. But not this." He stepped forward. You don't get to decide who makes Keva feel safe. She does. Margaret's face flushed. You're going to let her be raised by a woman who isn't her mother? I'm not letting anyone do anything, Daniel said. I'm standing beside the girl who finally smiled again, and I won't let you steal that from her. Margaret's voice cracked with fury. Then I'll file for custody. Daniel didn't flinch. Do what you need to do, but I suggest you ask Keva what she needs before you go trying to own her. Clara sat alone on the wooden bench behind the school that Friday evening, the sun dipping low behind the city skyline. Her hands were clenched around a letter. She had spent the last 2 nights pacing her apartment, haunted by Margaret's words. You think you can replace my daughter? No, Clara didn't. She didn't want to replace anyone. But maybe unintentionally she had crossed into something too fragile, too sacred. She loved Keva, loved the way she tilted her head when she listened, loved how she smiled with her whole body when she felt safe. And she was falling in love with Daniel, quietly, deeply. But now there were legal threats, questions of custody, reputation, and worst of all, Keva was in the middle of it. So Clara did what she thought was right. She resigned. She folded a letter, left it on Daniel's doorstep, and disappeared before sunrise. The letter read, Daniel, if my presence threatens Keva's peace, I'd rather disappear than take another safe place away from her. She has survived so much. She needs stillness, not more chaos. Please tell her that I never stopped caring, and I never will. Daniel found the letter the next morning and froze. He read it twice, then a third time. No, he whispered. He rushed to his phone, called her number. Disconnected. He called the school. They confirmed her resignation. No forwarding information, no goodbye. He stood in the middle of his living room, fists clenched. Damn it, he muttered, heart pounding. Then, sobbing, he had lost Emily. Now he had let Keva lose Clara. And Keva locked herself in her room the moment she found out. Maria, their housekeeper, knocked gently. Sweetheart, you need to eat. No answer. Daniel stood outside her door for hours. Baby, he said softly, please talk to me. She didn't. That night he sat on the floor outside her door. I know what it feels like to lose someone who brings light into a dark place, he said. I lost your mom, and I didn't fight hard enough to keep from losing Clara. Inside the room, silence. I won't let it happen again. A soft sniffle broke through. Daniel leaned closer. I promise you, Keva, I won't let you lose the one who brought your light back. The doorknob clicked. Slowly the door opened. Keva stood in her pajamas, eyes puffy, face pale. She held out Clara's letter, the edges wrinkled from her crying hands. Let's go find her, she whispered. Daniel knelt and wrapped her in his arms. Yes, he said, let's bring her home. It took Daniel 3 days to find her. The school had no forwarding address. Her phone was disconnected, but Clara wasn't the type to disappear entirely. She was the type to keep giving, even after breaking. Through one of the teachers at Southfield, Daniel learned she had gone to volunteer at a local community center, small, underfunded, but filled with color and heart. The kind of place Clara had always loved. A place where broken things quietly learned how to bloom again. He and Keva drove across town early on a Saturday morning. The neighborhood was rougher than theirs, the buildings older, the signs in multiple languages. They walked inside, hand in hand. And there she was. Clara stood at the back of a dusty art room, helping a child paint a sun with crooked rays and a bright blue smile. Her hair was tied up messily, a paint smear across one wrist. She looked tired and calm. Keva let go of Daniel's hand and walked forward. Clara didn't see them at first. Then she turned, froze. Her breath caught. Keva. The little girl stopped just a few feet away. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of pink paper, the same letter, the first one she ever wrote to her mother. She held it out with both hands. I saved it, Keva whispered, for someone who could read it with the same heart. Clara took the letter with trembling fingers. Her eyes filled almost immediately. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said. "Then why did you leave?" Keva asked, voice tiny. Clara dropped to her knees. "Because I was scared I didn't belong." Keva shook her head. "You do." Daniel stepped forward now, slow and sure. He didn't carry a ring, no flowers, no rehearsed speech, just the quiet, weathered look of a man who had broken and rebuilt and learned to love what was real. He looked at Clara. "I'm not here to ask for promises," he said. "We're not perfect, but we're real, and we're waiting for you." Clara looked at him, then at Keva. She didn't need time. She didn't need space. She only needed to stop running. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she wrapped Keva in her arms, then looked up at Daniel with a nod. "I want to come home, not to a title, not to a job, but to a life, to a family." That night they returned to the apartment. Clara sat on the couch with Keva, reading a story aloud by candlelight, while Daniel quietly cooked dinner in the background, badly but earnestly. No one said the word mother. No one needed to. It was written in the rhythm of Clara's voice, in Keva's laughter, in the way Daniel looked at them both, like they were the miracle he never deserved, but somehow found anyway. Clara hadn't come back as the teacher. She had come back as something far more sacred. Home. A full year had passed. The seasons had circled through their motions. Flowers bloomed, leaves fell, snow came and melted. And so had the small world of the Ross family. Except now the world looked different, brighter. Southfield Elementary still stood humbly at the corner of two quiet streets, but within its walls something extraordinary had taken root. Keva had blossomed. She was no longer the silent girl in the back of the classroom. She was now a peer mentor, sitting with new students at lunch, leading Feeling Circle every Thursday, and designing posters for the hallway's kindness campaign. Teachers often spoke of her empathy, her quiet leadership, and the way she always made space for the quietest voices. Daniel had blossomed too, in his own way. He had begun stepping back from high-stakes boardrooms and stepping into something he never expected: advocacy. He and Clara had launched a joint initiative called the Southfield Center for Learning and Emotional Recovery, an expansion of Clara's classroom model, offering free programs for children navigating grief, trauma, or emotional silence. They had found a rhythm, soft, imperfect, real, and through it all, Clara was their center. On a sunlit June morning, the school buzzed with anticipation. Parents, teachers, and families filled the fold-out chairs on the front lawn for the fifth-grade graduation ceremony. Streamers danced in the wind, children fidgeted in new shoes, and cameras clicked like popcorn. Among them stood Margaret Whitmore. She had not spoken to Daniel much since the custody threats had quietly fizzled out. But over the months, she had seen the photos Keva sent her. She had heard her voice on weekend calls, and while she had not said it out loud, something inside her had softened. Now she stood quietly in the back row, clutching her purse tightly, eyes scanning for her granddaughter. And then there was Keva, standing tall at the podium, her hair braided with yellow ribbons, holding a note she had written on pink paper. She looked out at the sea of faces, and then she began. "When I first came to Southfield, I didn't talk, I didn't laugh. I didn't know how to feel anything but sad." There was a hush over the crowd. I had lost my mom, and for a long time I thought maybe I lost my voice too. But then I met a woman who didn't ask me to speak. She just sat with me until I was ready. Clara, sitting beside Daniel in the front row, felt her throat tighten. She gave me crayons and music and space to breathe. She didn't tell me I was broken, she showed me. I was healing. Daniel reached over, gently taking Clara's hand in his. Keva continued, her voice growing steadier. And over time, I found my words again, my smile, my safe place. She paused, then looked directly at Clara. Today, I want to thank my dad for never giving up on me, and I want to thank the woman who helped me become myself again. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Today, I want to call her what I've felt all along." "Mom?" Clara's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth. The crowd gasped softly. Then applause rippled, slow and swelling. Tears ran down Clara's face as Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. Margaret, from the back, blinked rapidly, her lips parting in disbelief, but even she couldn't deny it. The light in her granddaughter's face was undeniable. And in that moment, something inside her broke and mended. Later that evening, long after the speeches had ended and the last cookie from the refreshment table had been eaten, Daniel, Clara, and Keva walked together through the quiet halls of the school one final time before summer. They moved slowly, passing drawings Keva had once taped to the walls, the bookshelf where she first learned to write again, the soft beanbag still gathered in a reading circle. Outside, the sky had turned gold, then copper, then lavender. They stepped into the grass barefoot, shoes forgotten. Keva skipped ahead, chasing the last rays of the sun. Her laughter echoed over the empty lawn, bright and free. Daniel and Clara walked side by side, their hands brushing, then clasping naturally. There were no big declarations, no formalities, just breath and peace and presence. And family. A new kind of family. One forged not by blood alone but by choice, healing and love. As they reached the front gate, a new wooden sign gleamed in the fading light. It read, "Southfield, where children find their voices and grown-ups learn to listen." Clara smiled. Daniel kissed her temple. Keva turned and shouted, "Hurry up, slowpokes!" And the three of them walked home together, whole. And so, from a simple mistake on a school form, came the greatest discovery of all. A voice returned, a family reimagined, and a love that healed not just a little girl, but everyone who dared to believe in second chances. Because sometimes, it is not the path we plan that leads us home. It is the one we never saw coming. If this story moved your heart, made you smile, or reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, please subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that warm the soul, restore your faith in love, and celebrate the beauty of being human. Let us remind you, one story at a time, that healing is possible and hope is always waiting.